getting
The Chuck Oliver Show begins in exactly 3 minutes from Mark. Southern Sports Today presents The Chuck Oliver Show, and it starts in exactly 2 minutes from Mark.
All right, why my ear is cutting out a little bit? Yeah, just pop again.
I hear it. It's on the...
The Chuck Oliver Show on Southern Sports Today begins in exactly 60 seconds from Mark.
Yeah, this internet seems to be going through a little drama.
Chuck Harris, Cherokee, like to tweet.
In the South, it's always college football season. King of college football reigns supreme all year long. Southern Sports Today proudly presents The Chuck Oliver Show. It's an inside look at everything college football. Now live from Atlanta, Georgia, it's time to talk college football with the reigning king of college football, Chuck Oliver, on Southern Sports Today.
I'm getting even more impressed with an SEC head coach I've always thought did a good job. I think just about everybody came around last year. It is the Chuck Oliver Show on a Friday, and it is another one of those days that I absolutely love my job from the floor of the book. Harrah, Cherokee in Cherokee, North Carolina. The book, that is right, just around the corner, folks. The book will be cutting out ribbon, and you will have betting, live sports wagering on professional and collegiate sports right here at Harrah, Cherokee. Again, the book in Cherokee, North Carolina, and that's where I'm broadcasting today. And I'm going to be up here regularly throughout the entire calendar year whenever there's a giant sporting event that you will want to walk to the window and go, all right, I got a Franklin, North Carolina, Arizona State, the Ravens, etc. You'll be able to do all of that as we continue from the book at Harrah, Cherokee. I said I'm getting even more impressed with an SEC head coach that I've always thought did a good job. And this past season, maybe we became more appreciative of what we had been dismissive of before, or we became more appreciative with something that we had already declared that we knew what it was going to be. thing that for men, when we declare, when we announce, then it's almost carved in stone 11th commandment. We have a hard time backpedaling. In the coaching profession, we have a little bit of leeway with that, though, because somebody like, for instance, Lane Kiffin can sort of go away. And the Lane Kiffin that was the Tennessee head coach more than a decade ago now, when he resurfaces on the sidelines at Alabama, and then when he really disappears and is out of the sport for about 3 or 4 years, or he's the head coach at FAU, either one. And honestly, for an ACC fan, for an SEC, if you're a Florida State fan, you're not thinking a lot about the Owls. And so, oh yeah, Lane Kiffin, he's out of the sport. Tennessee fan, I got my own stuff to worry about. So Lane Kiffin was out of football or in Boca. And then he resurfaced last year. Oh, he got back into the sport? Yes, he got back into the sport as head coach at Ole Miss. And Lane Kiffin took advantage of what honestly was your only shot to recruit during the regular season, and that was to recruit on television for 3 hours every Saturday afternoon. Ole Miss, that roster, by and large, it might have been a 500 roster, and that's what they wound up being. And so you say the output, the productivity, like the talent, it equaled at least the output, if not more. And so that's one of my measuring sticks for how, I decide what a coach has done or an individual player. The reason I say it's important, at least for the men, because women who are college football fans are like, oh, yeah, I'm a lot more analytical, and, yeah, he does a good job, so that means he does 395 times in a college season, plus throwing the ball 11 times. Ole Miss, well, it wasn't a national championship. It wasn't an SEC champion. It wasn't a division. He kept Ole Miss in the fight for a roster that was maybe 500. He kept Ole Miss in the fight based around a wide receiver that about the size of a hood ornament. Elijah Moore, a guy that Kirby Smart, and let's just call it what it was. Elijah Moore, Georgia commit. Elijah, why don't we both find something else to do? Why don't you find a new school to play out, and why don't I find a new wide receiver to give a scholarship to? Because I just don't want to give a scholarship to a wide receiver who's 5'8". I just don't think I want to. He's like, all right, cool. Oxford, y'all want me? Boom, there. Moore was as dominant as any receiver in the nation not named Devonta Smith. And I say Lane, kept Ole Miss in the fight. I'm saying scheme-wise as much as you can. Players still got to go out and do their part. But that's about as different as you can be. And there is no shortcut to that other than vision of what a guy can be in your system and then coaching them. To that end, Richard Cross, my good friend from his radio network in the state of Mississippi, also the sideline reporter for the official broadcast of the Ole Miss radio network. We're going to take a break, come back, talk a little Rebels with Richard Cross. That's next.
Attention! Do you owe back taxes, fines, and penalties to the IRS? The IRS now offers new relief options for taxpayers affected by COVID-19, but you can't go it alone. Call Tax Solutions now. Our team of former IRS agents and tax professionals can get you the best deal. We know the COVID-19 rules. Call us and never speak to the IRS again.
I couldn't sleep. We were being audited. I called Tax Solutions now, and a great big weight was lifted off my shoulders.
I called Tax Solutions now, and they got the IRS off my back.
Tax Solutions now had my wage garnishment lifted in 48 hours.
The virus has caused the IRS to take extensive action to help taxpayers. So if you owe $10,000 or more, this is the best time in years to settle your tax debt.
I qualified for the Fresh Start program. I paid less than I owed.
Remember, the IRS will not give up until you pay. Call 800-646-6511. 800-646-6511.
Jack Craps Roulette, you want it, they got it. And if you're looking to turn your escape into the ultimate gambling adventure, head to Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort in Cherokee, North Carolina for their new and expanded poker room, a huge sports viewing area, over 2,900 Vegas-style slots and table games, golf at Sequoia National Golf Club, and so much more. And with the book opening soon, you'll be able to bet on pro and collegiate sports at 2 perfectly tailored gambling getaways. Visit HarrisCherokee.com for details.
Must be 21 years of age or older to enter the casino floor and to gamble, and must present a valid state or federal photo ID upon request. Know when to stop before you start. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700. An enterprise of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians.
Here's farmer and landowner John Prue.
We purchased the land about 3 years ago, and there was an old farmstead on there with trees. We were going to clear the land so we could farm through it. We thought we knew where the pipe was, so we didn't call to get it located. The work on our property led to the damage of a light crude pipeline. Fortunately, no one was hurt, but it could have been much worse.
Never assume the location or depth of underground lines. Always call 811 or visit clickbeforeyoudig.com before you start work. A message from the Pipeline Operators for Ag Safety Campaign.
Bad theater seats, cheap Halloween masks, my apartment, all things with obstructed views. Add to these large trucks and buses. 18-wheelers and large buses have big blind spots, and like my apartment, they don't always have the best view. Bus and truck drivers deal with blind spots around the entire vehicle. Always take care not to ride alongside or too close behind them. Our roads, our safety. Learn more at sharetheroadsafely.gov.
Meet Ed, movie buff, animal lover, safe driver.
5 years of driving an ambulance teaches you a thing or two. If people knew what I know, lives could be saved. When
Richard Cross is ready.
Rush past the turning bus, I get concerned. You see, when big vehicles turn right, they have to swing wide to make the turn. And that's a lesson you don't want to learn the hard way. When trucks and buses turn, let's you and I wait.
It's our roads.
It's our safety. Visit www.sharetheroadsafely.gov.
If you suffer from COPD symptoms like shortness of breath and fatigue, where do you turn? There are medications and oxygen, but do you know about pulmonary rehab? 3 out of 5 COPD patients have never heard of it. Pulmonary rehab is an exercise, education, and support program that gives you tools to manage your condition, and Medicare typically pays for it. So whether it's grocery shopping on your own or just walking across the room, pulmonary rehab can help you. Visit livebetter.org to find out about your options for pulmonary rehab today.
Catch the king of college football no matter where you go with the new Southern Sports Today app. Catch the best college football conversation in the South everywhere with the SST live stream and daily podcast. Download it now at the App Store and the Google Play Store. Now more of the best college football talk in the country. It's the Chuck Oliver Show.
Normally, the only place I can guarantee you that you're going to see Richard Cross is on the sidelines of an Ole Miss game. Right now, you would have to be in South Florida, and he would be slathering 45 all over himself. Richard Cross, how are you, brother?
I am fantastic, Chuck. I'm staring at turquoise, green, and blue waters right off of South Beach, and I didn't slather 45, but I did get the good spray. So hopefully knocking a little of the pasty off in early February. What's up, my man?
Not much, man. I just found out you were down in. I got the text from Dan, our producer. He said, hey, he's down in South Beach. I was like, oh, my gosh, I'm going to start there because, I'm jealous, but that's one of my favorite vacation spots. In fact, my wife and I were down there the week of Thanksgiving. It's just unbelievably gorgeous. But, of course, I use for my SPF, I think it actually says for infants and the elderly. So I try to cover up as much as possible. So, anyway, let's talk football a little bit. Before you came on, I was discussing my increasing respect and how impressed I am with Lane Kiffin. And I was thinking the other day, I was like, he put together a dominant college football offense based around Derrick Henry and 395 carries. He put together a dominant college football offense based around a wide receiver as big as your pinky. That's not nothing, Richard. He's on the short list of elite offensive minds and play callers.
I agree, and probably another reason to think that he's doing right. I'd say there's a better than 50-50 chance that within 30 miles of where I sit right now, he's on a boat in the off season. He's not necessarily grinding away that some guys do. But in terms, look, Chuck, you and I've talked about this before. Lane Kiffin is a different guy. He's different than his Twitter persona. He's different than kind of what you think you're getting for him on a national platform. But when it boils down to it, he is, and I guess I'm kind of borrowing your words here, one of the most gifted offensive minds in all of football. And, you know, it's funny how different people in the college football world provide information to you. I was talking to a buddy who is he's in the agent community, and we were just kind of talking about different jobs that were open and, you know, play callers, offensive minds, who's attractive, who's not. And this guy, and I think he was a little biased, and that's fair, but said that, you know, in terms of pure offensive minds, at the top of his list would be Lane Kiffin and Steve Sarkisian. And maybe we should just trust the fact that Nick Saban is not dumb. And when he goes out and hires guys like that who have different personalities to bring into his organization, and we see the level of success, maybe we all should be believers.
Continuing with Richard Cross from the Super Talk Mississippi Network and South Beach right now with the Pelican. Or is that a Seagull? What do we got there?
Seagulls.
All right.
Aggressive seagulls.
Let's talk about what's going to happen going forward because, you know, Matt Corral back for another year, obviously giddy up on offense, and a lot of the talent that I was talking about, they're not, you know, Kenny Yeboah's moving on. That was always the idea. He was a one and done, a little higher gun there. But there are building blocks of what happened last year in the 2020 season. There are building blocks that are coming back for 21 as well.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. And you mentioned Matt Corral. I mean, that's where it starts. And if he has the kind of season next year that he had last year, sans 2 games with a bunch of interceptions. I mean, you take away the Arkansas game and the LSU game, and he was as efficient as any quarterback there in the country. And I'm not saying you go an entire season where, you know, you only average half an interception a game. It doesn't have to be that, but you can't have a 6-interception game or a 5-interception game. So let's just say that, you know, you play a full 12-game schedule and he throws for, you know, 4,200 yards and 35 touchdowns and only has, you know, 9 or 10 interceptions, and it coincides with Ole Miss winning 8 or 9 games, and that was a lot of if, right? Then he's in the Heisman Trophy conversation. I'm not saying he wins it, but he certainly is in the conversation, and he's in the conversation for best quarterback in the Southeastern Conference. They've got to develop at wide receiver. Elijah Moore was so much the offense, but what you said to start this conversation, Chuck, is fascinating to me because Lane Kiffin kind of, once all the dust is settled from recruiting, when it's all done, he looks and he says, what's my best offensive playmaker? And if it's a 230-pound running back, then the offense runs through him. And if it's a 160-pound wide receiver that has great playmaking ability in the open field, then you figure out a way to get him in the open field. I'm not sure right now who that guy is going to be, but I do know that he's got some options with Jerrion Ealy out of the backfield, with some decent wide receivers either coming back or coming in. You know, with Snoop Connor in the backfield, with Henry Parrish Jr. I mean, there's some pieces there that make you think, given his track record, that the offense is going to be good again.
A couple of more minutes of Richard Cross, again, from the Ole Miss sidelines, among other places, also SEC Network, especially calling hoops there. Richard, if we look at, you know, the landscape of the two programs, the two SEC programs in state, you know, Mike Leach, there was supposed to be, and not compared to Ole Miss, but there was supposed to be more excitement, more of the same sort of feeling that everybody has about the Rebels. There's supposed to be a lot more of that about the Bulldogs, and that's kind of absent right now. What's your take on the season and where they are heading into year 2? It was never going to be an easier, quick transition.
No, it wasn't, but today's college football fan expects instant gratification. And so there was a lot, especially 7 games into the year, of this is never going to work. This was a stupid idea. He's got to go. Make now. It's a Band-Aid off. You know, John Cohen needs to go too. And then you watch the last 4 games of the year. So, you know, season opener against LSU, give KJ Costello the Heisman and Mike Leach is the coach of the year, and just stop the conversation.
And it will be this way every 7 days for the next 3 months.
Exactly. But then for weeks 2 through 6, it was an abject disaster. 2 points against Kentucky, shut out by Alabama. So something happened twice that had never, ever happened in the history of Mike Leach as a head football coach. And that was his offense didn't score a point. It happened twice this year. And so the frustration was there. But then when you make the change at quarterback and you go through that sequence at the end that kind of started with Georgia and continued with Ole Miss and happened against Missouri, less so in the bowl game, it was an offense that was productive. They can run the football a little bit. And I know that's not what Mike Leach does, but I'm sorry you're in the SEC, and you've got to run the football a little bit. Being one-dimensional in the SEC just doesn't work. It just doesn't.
Richard.
And so when they started doing that just a little bit, they got better offensively at the end and were efficient in the passing game as well.
Richard, take about a minute here because, one thing you and I both talked about back during the shutdown when we were still speculative about a season was, you said, oh, yeah, y'all are like a lot of places. The loss of high school football will be just as impactful as anything else. That's how huge it is in the state of Mississippi. How has the one-year transition with Lane and Leach kind of been receptive, throughout the state, the high school coaches? Just real quick overview.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to believe that that is a relationship that needs work in both scenarios because those opportunities haven't existed. I mean, there may have been some Zoom meetings with high school coaches, but in terms of the high school coaches convention where, the head coaches from, Ole Miss and Mississippi State and Southern Miss come in and speak every year and you get some, FaceTime and some handshaking time and some building relationship time. Those haven't existed and you haven't had a chance to have assistant coaches in schools. So given that, to look at Mississippi State at, 25, 27 in terms of the recruiting rankings and Ole Miss at 17, 18, 19, I think it's a remarkable job that both did building relationships in this unprecedented time that we're in.
Yeah, and the Rebels beating away some big ones, LSU, A&M, et cetera, for that Big D tackle at the end as well. Richard, appreciate the time, brother. Back to your vacation, man.
Thanks, Chuck.
All right, Richard Cross down from South Florida in South Beach, and just a lovely place. I can't afford to live there. Can barely afford to vacation there for a few days. But Richard, same taste apparently down there on South Beach. So, yeah, with Lane Kiffin, it was just an interesting contradiction there. And he looks around and is like, all right, what's in the cabinet? And that has always, to me, been just an amazing ability. Be able to look in the cabinet and say, all right, I can build something with this. That's what Lane has done. Instead of a meal, it's an offense.
always college football time in the South. Now back to more of the king of college football, Chuck Oliver, on Southern Sports Today.
All week, all year, it's all college football on the Chuck Oliver Show. 9 states, 51 sticks. It is what we do. And today, broadcasting live from the book, Harrah, Cherokee in Cherokee, North Carolina. And, folks, I mean right around the corner in golf parlance. We are a tee shot and a 4-iron from having the book ready to roll, and it is going to be live sports wagering whenever you want it, professional collegiate sports as well. So we are here previewing the entire thing ahead of the big game coming up on Sunday. I want to head out now to a good friend of the program, straight from Tuscaloosa, and hey, we're there too, 100.9 FM. It is Ryan Fowler. Ryan, how are you, brother?
Man, I'm doing good. Now, listen now, Chuck, I expect you to go up and go through that buffet at least one time, man. You got to go one lap around that buffet at least one time.
Yeah, you know, I went with the biscuits and gravy. I actually did the sit-down this morning, trying to pretend to be respectable in the casino environment. So, but you're right.
I got you.
Always one of the highlights. Let's talk about what somehow is a ho-hum experience, I would imagine, to some degree, but Alabama finishing not just with the number one nation class in the nation again, recruiting-wise, but possibly the number one ranked recruiting class in the history of recruiting rankings. Just give us a download, Ryan.
Well, I tell you what, I followed Nick Saban, and, you know, the first couple of years you would watch it and you're like, okay, he built this confidence where you almost didn't have to worry about recruiting because you knew that he was going to sign the very, very best players. And my favorite email now is the one that they send out post signing day, that they list all these different credentials. You know, they'll say, well, they signed 15 of the 100 top players or whatever, and it's, it just lists their credentials. And this thing fills up like 6 pages lengthy of all these different credentials that these guys are bringing in, like 9 5-stars, at least 1 5-star per different recruiting service. They had 9 different guys who ranked 5 stars. You just go through the recruiting class, and you're like, wow. And I know somebody that you guys feature, Chris Landry. He was telling me the other day that Alabama, in the upcoming top 300 players in college football, that there's 70 of them that are playing for Alabama. So then you kind of flip it and you ask the question, how do you beat this guy? How do you beat this guy? Because the talent, at the end of the day, comes out on top, and Nick Saban has got the talent.
Interesting as well, I've always given Nick Saban a lot of credit for his ability to not only adapt, pivot, however you want to say it, Ryan, give him a lot of credit for that. And he was actually kind of ahead of the curve as far as scouting other college players who decided to transfer. And I've talked about this with Dieter and Mulaney and some others. This year, he goes, I think entirely in this year's class, to high school players. It's almost like he created a market for every other program to go, we're going to get transfers. And he's like, all right, and I'll get all the high school kids now.
Well, and look at it. I mean, look at the talent that he brought in, and look at the coaching staff that he lost. But it's, the early signing period, I think, helps when you go through the transition. And, it's almost like, maybe I see it from a wrong perspective, but I see all these different ways that they've tried to slow down what Nick Saban has been able to do. Yep. And he's almost used it to his advantage. The early signing period was created, I think, and in my opinion, some of it was created where some of the teams could get these players, but other teams are competing for bowls and they're preparing for bowls, then it would create more parity. It was just another step to create more parity in college football. And Nick Saban has kind of used that because now he can get them locked up, and then if his coaches depart, like they only signed 2 on Wednesday. Yep. They already had their 25 locked up. So it's almost like he's used that to his advantage to get these guys, their secretary on the line. So it's pretty crazy. And I always like when he's asked a question, like, well, when are you going to retire? Because I think that's really the only way some of these teams are going to have to play catch-up is they're just hoping that at some point he will step away, and I don't think that time is anytime soon.
Yeah, Ryan, you're spot on with that theme there. And as far as the early signing period, if you remember, it was partly like Nick Saban and one of the programs, one of the evil coaches that people cited about. Now your offer has to actually be an offer 6 weeks earlier, and that's going to be a problem for guys like Nick Saban. He actually kind of flipped that around, and you're right, using it. It reminds me of, remember Augusta National. We're going to lengthen the course to penalize Tiger, and it actually played more into Tiger's hands.
Sure. Well, and it's kind of like the up-tempo offense, the RPO. I remember when he stood at the podium, and I know you and I have talked about this before, but he asked the question. He said, is this really where y'all want to take college football? Is this really where you want to go? And obviously they did. I mean, they stuck with the rules. They didn't change the 3 yards to match the NFL 1 yard down the field, ineligible lineman downfield. And now he's taking it, and it's almost like, okay, I'm gonna do it bigger and better, and I'm gonna show you. And Nick Saban has taken a lot of things that was used against him. Now his defense is still, not where it needs to be. But in this current time frame that we're in, it doesn't have to be. Just outscore them, and that's the name of the game.
Is there a scenario in your mind, outside of injury or et cetera, where Bryce Young is not the starting quarterback week one?
There's been so much talk, and we've been in some pretty heavy quarterback battles over here, and it's kind of hard to look past Bryce Young because he came in without a spring practice, and Nick Saban thought enough of him to put him at that number 2 spot.
Yeah.
Like he earned the playing time enough to say he's our number 2 guy. Now, there's been a lot of buzz here with Paul Tyson, which is Coach Bryant's great-grandson, that he has also improved. I think the one thing in my mind, after watching Mac Jones, I'm never going to count anybody else out. Because in my mind, I don't think anybody, I mean, there's some people say that they thought it was going to happen. I'm not sure I believe it.
I didn't.
Yeah. But to do what Mac Jones, from where he developed out of Jacksonville, Florida, to become, a Heisman finalist, to be able to set all these awards and this, records. So at this point in my mind, it's like I'm not going to count anybody out. I mean, you look at Jaden George. He's a walk-on from Indiana, which is Jeff George's son. He's a part of the team. He was highly recruited, probably about a 3-star guy that got him to walk on. Jay Barker's son, Braxton Barker, is also on the team. These guys, listen, I'm just not going to count anybody else. That's the point that I'm trying to make is who knows who will step in. It will probably take a lot for Bryce Young to beat out, but I've seen crazy things happen in Tuscaloosa.
Is there a lead dog in the backfield, and who is it?
Look at the number of running backs that this program has right now. When you look at the 5-stars back there, and then you just added Wheaton on Wednesday. Yep. Brian Robinson at times shows you that he can be an elite SEC college football back, but I still think there's some things there. He's a guy that has put it on the ground quite a bit. I just don't feel like it's him. If you ask me right now who's going to be Alabama's leading running back right now, I would say Jace McClellan. And I think they tried to hide him a little bit and play Brian Robinson because they were trying to recruit Wheaton out of Texas. And see, you show these guys as true freshmen, and you kind of run away other guys because they're like, hold on a minute, I'm not going there. But I think if you look at it and you say, well, Brian Robinson's our number 2 guy, I just feel like that Roydell Williams and Jace McClellan are probably going to be 1 and 2. Brian's going to have to step up as a senior, or he's going to lose a lot of playing time. I think it's Jace McClellan.
All right, you got to bet your 100.9 FM pension on this. All right, so your retirement future, your retirement dignity is on the line. Give me three Alabama players that will be at media days.
Oh, my heavens. Christian Harris is 1. Oh, my heavens. Wow, what a question.
See, the point isn't the answer, because I did the same thing. Because I'm going through, and I've got all these different little off-season pursuits I do, Ryan.
Sure.
And I'm supposed to have some easy answers. When I go around, I do it to every SEC and ACC team. Who will they bring to media days? And it's supposed to be easy for certain programs. I looked at the Bama team this year, and I was like, I don't know who they would bring. Mechie?
Well, yeah, probably. I mean, John Mechie would be a guy there. They're not going to bring any of the backs because and they're not going to bring a quarterback.
No, it's more difficult than it's ever been.
Line. Yeah, I mean, wow.
Tell you what, you got to think about that next time you're on.
No.
Two things. Next time you're on, I want all three names, and then also tell me if Mechie, if we interview him, he can answer in French. Like, is he from that part of Canada?
I do think he knows the French language. I do think that is one of the skill characteristics there. Man, you have stumped me on this three because I'm just going. I mean, I'm literally going through the. Is there a chance they bring a kicker like Will Reichard? I mean,
Saban might do that. He would, but like I said, the reason I'm asking you is because I was going through doing the same thing, and I'm like, with LSU, all right, here's my guess. With A&M, with Tennessee, even, I was like, all right, who's still on the roster? With Alabama, I was like, not a quarterback, not a running back, not the left tackle, not the wide receiver, unless it's Mechie. I quickly ran out of position groups, and so I was like, I'm going to ask Ryan this on the fly and see how it goes.
It would. I mean, just taking a guess, John Mechie, Christian Harris, Jordan Battle's a really good talker. That might be an option. Josh Jobe could be a guy, but it tells you the youth of that team because Saban's got to trust you. He's got to trust you to walk in front of all those cameras, and a lot of these guys have not even met the media because they were true freshmen and did get the media opportunity.
All right, Ryan. Well, I tell you what, brother, I appreciate the. Like I said, it's kind of it kind of takes the pressure off me because the same thing happened. When I asked you the question.
Yeah.
All right, Ryan. We will do it again soon, brother. I appreciate you making time today. Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. Have a great trip in the mountains. Thank you so much.
All right, Ryan Fowler again from 100.9 FM. We're going to take a break from Cherokee, North Carolina. Be back next.
Now back to the Chuck Oliver Show on Southern Sports Today.
You end up maybe getting some guys that you find out later on that there are guys that fit your criteria even better, but you can't take them because you're already full. So that's why we sort of make sure we go through the process and make sure these guys are people who are a good fit for our culture here at Alabama.
Live from Harrah, Cherokee, North Carolina. You got two choices in the state. Murphy. I'm in Cherokee. I'm at the OC, the original casino in Cherokee. Live at the Book, and it is opening just around the corner. It is live. If there's a sporting event in college or pro sports, you can wager on it at the Book. Again, just about to cut that ribbon. Want to have a preview weekend ahead of the Super Bowl. Giant party happening here again. Harrah's in Cherokee, North Carolina. That was Nick Saban. Putting my mind at ease, and I got to be honest, I really appreciate him clarifying that he did not hastily put together the number one ranked recruiting class in the history of recruiting classes. I appreciate Nick Saban letting us all know that he went about it at a leisurely pace, putting together the greatest recruiting class in the history of recruiting classes. I am now starting to, instead of criticize Nick Saban, I realize, because there are times with the roster management, if we go back 5-10 years, in fact, you know what? The first, I'm going to say, I think it was the first 5 seasons that Nick Saban was the head coach at Alabama. I think, because I asked him about this, he didn't like it. But I think it was the first 5 seasons at Alabama. The program had a total of 12 medical red shirts. And again, this goes back to what would that be? 7, 8, 9, 10. So the first 5 years. Now we're going back a decade now. So the landscape for everything has changed. In fact, roster management is a desirable trait for a head coach. But it used to be something, and I mentioned this yesterday, that we'd all pile on Nick Saban about, oh, he's so cold and ruthless, and he was also winning national championships while we were going, yeah, you're cold and ruthless. I know long ago I learned Nick Saban doesn't necessarily care about your opinion, my opinion. If his job is to win championships and prepare these guys to support their families. And so that's what Nick Saban does at the highest level anyone ever has. So if you go back to those first 5 years in the medical red shirts, I want to get this right. I think Alabama had 11. The rest of the conference combined had 12. So you were basically like 14 or 15 times more likely to have a career-ending injury, at least from you counting against their 85 scholarships for players. You get to stay on scholarship. You can go to school. But I remember asking him, it's like the numbers say you're like, 14, 15 times more likely to have a career-ending injury in Tuscaloosa. How is that? Well, again, it's not normal now, but it's a lot more normal. And so I have gone from criticizing Nick Saban, because I looked at that, I was like, all these guys aren't hurt to the point where they can't play ever again. They were hurt to the point that you would have a kid, and I'm just going to name one example. By the way, this is a good kid. He worked hard. Terry Grant was a running back who, if I'm remembering, he led the team in rushing Nick Saban's first year as head coach. Terry Grant wouldn't be on scholarship at Alabama. That's just not what. And by the way, when he was, I think his junior or maybe junior and senior years, was just kind of a bit player. Good kid, worked his tail off, got to play a lot. Because in 2007, they're like, all right, he's the best kid. And then he wasn't the best kid anymore. And that's just kind of the Nick Saban deal. So that's what it was going back in the day. And so I was like, I'm going to put the criticism aside, because it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what the outcome is. And the outcome is confetti and a trophy. So I went from, is this, something I agree with or what I want my program to do it? And I was like, well, whatever it is, the answer is yes, because I'd like to win titles. To just seeing and trying to predict where Nick Saban's mind is, trying to figure out what his next step is. That's where my mind went. And so I'm now I'm wondering, am I giving him too much credit for stuff? Because I'm wondering, and I was just mentioning it with Ryan Fowler, you look at their class. Alabama signed, I believe, 27 kids. And it's an old school class because it's just kids coming out of high school. And they're going to count back or move a kid forward, or they're going to do something to get 27 in. And they'll exceed 85 because you can do that, but you can't exceed 25. So I'm wondering if, not as something he planned, because that would be impossible, but as a pretty astute pivot, all right, you know what we can do that is not even going to pay dividends just today? Do we realize that the highest ranked recruiting class in college football history, do we realize that there is a likely payoff that's not even part of this year? It's in 2 or 3 years when teams that finished second or third or fourth or fifth or sixth and brought in, 8 transfers in a year or two, where their coaching staff, they're not just replacing 16 kids in the senior class. They're like, whoa, wait a minute. It's 16 kids, and then all 8 of these transfers. We just recruited that scholarship a year ago. Now we have to Nick Saban won't. Some of them who transfer and move on, he will. And with Nick Saban, the goal, honestly, he doesn't care about a kid turning pro after 3 years. He looks around and says, that's great for the program. So he's going to get actually even more of a benefit because he's taking in 18-year-old kids who won't move on in as many cases after 1 year or even 2 years as transfer will. So there is still another benefit, just like waiting out there on the horizon. Because now Nick Saban looks around and is like, oh, okay, everybody's taking transfers like we did about 5, 6, 7 years ago. Pivot, just high school kids. And in 22, 23, 24, when so many other programs are having to retrace their steps, recruiting-wise, wow, we got to fill that scholarship again because he was only here. Nick Saban, there's going to be a little bit of an advantage, even more so. Dan Matthews, how you doing today?
Oh, very well, and it looks like and sounds like you guys are having a great time up in North Carolina. One thing, and kind of enter a little bit of uncharted territory here, and it's disagree with you. Yesterday you talked about how Lane Kiffin would prefer to have the 4-star defensive tackle over the 4-star quarterback, and I think there is kind of a half-truth to that. Because I want to tell you a story about a wide receiver that played in the Dallas area in Texas a few years ago, and he was being recruited by everybody that there was. But oddly enough, there was a guy at Texas Tech named Mike Leach who said, why would you go to those other places when you can come play for me? You can showcase yourself much more than you would in any other place, and you're going to have the opportunity to become a top-tier wide receiver. That guy was Michael Crabtree, and he's in the NFL because he made that decision to go and develop and become one of the best pass catchers in the country. I think that Lane Kiffin, to a point, yes, he does like the fact that he can go to people and people come up to him and say, Coach, man, you did a fantastic job with that quarterback. I mean, how were you able to develop that guy? He can brush his shoulders and say, yeah, hey, look at me. But that guy has a shelf life because that coach, it's to the point where the yeah buts come out. It's like, yeah, hey, he can develop players, but he only won 8 games a season. If he gets that top-tier guy, that's the only thing that Lane Kiffin is missing now. And I think to a point, he's got that with Matt Corral because let's face it here, Matt Corral is not somebody who was just a forgotten guy coming out of high school. He was one of the most sought-after guys in the country.
Yep.
Absolutely. I mean, Florida, everybody wanted him, and Lane Kiffin's got him. He's got an opportunity to win with him. The next front
30 seconds.
Lane is going to be to find the right defensive guy. And like I've said before, Chuck, how do you win in college football now? You're capable defensively.
Yeah, it's good enough. It's not good defense. It's good enough defense and a situational defense. It is absolutely those two terms. And I think that there is an offensive sort of arrogance that's a good thing for a coach. That, that quarterback, I see a couple of skills. I can round all those out. There ain't no rounding out a defensive tackle if he's 260 pounds. It just doesn't happen.
Attention Medicare recipients.
from the book. Harrah's Cherokee and Harrah's in Cherokee, North Carolina. The book will be opening. I mean, we got the big scissors out, just about to cut that ribbon. Here, previewing the book ahead of Super Bowl weekend. Again, Harrah's Cherokee in Cherokee, North Carolina. Live sports wagering, collegiate and pro sports. That's what's ahead of you here in North Carolina. Coming up in, just a few minutes from now, we're going to replay. Actually had Auburn head coach Brian Harsin joined us yesterday in hour one. I know different people listen different times each day, so we're going to bring that back, play that in about 10 minutes. Bottom of the hour as well, Will Vandervoort coming on from the Clemson Insider. Going to talk Clemson and where they sit in the offseason as they are now into into winter workouts, getting ready for spring practice and the spring game, and hopefully a much more normal existence in March and April. Remember, they had 9 practices last year, which kind of put them ahead of the pack with almost everybody. Appreciate in hour one Richard Cross coming on from the SEC Network, also from the sidelines of the Ole Miss official radio broadcast. Ryan Fowler, afternoon drive host at 100.9 FM there in Tuscaloosa. Right now, I'm going to get you up to date.
Everything you need to know about college football every single day. This is CFB 365. Presented by EcoDerm. Text EcoDerm to 31996 now for your free sample of EcoDerm Pain Relief Cream and CBD from Frank Thomas. Text ECODERM to 31996 now.
Headline, Clemson OC Elliott gets extension and raise. Boy, that's inadequate. He got a 3-year extension to what was already, I think he had 2 more years left on his contract, and so he got 3 more years. Folks, you have an offensive coordinator in college football heading into the season with 5 years on the books and a raise to $2 million annually. That means that of the 3 assistant coaches in America making $2 million a year, up to 3, 2 of them are on the staff at Clemson. Of course, Brent Venables on the other side. Somebody's pay went down, though. Now a couple other people went up, but Brent Dearman, Danny Bierman, the tight ends coach and special teams coordinator, he has been moved to an off-field role. Mickey Kahn is now the special teams coordinator, and I'm trying to remember, he might have been coaching safeties. So the Clemson staff, there's a little bit of a rejiggering, and C.J. Spiller was approved. He is now officially an on-field coach as well. Headline, new congressional bill aims to make name, image, likeness, quote, a federal right for college athletes. From the state of Connecticut, one of their reps has introduced a congressional bill that, quote, with the fewest restrictions possible, would allow essentially an athlete on scholarship to function just like any other member of the student body at Washington State. That if you are a sophomore chemistry major and you made fun of YouTube videos and Taco Bell wanted to sponsor you, you could say, all right, Taco Bell, you're a sponsor of my YouTube page because I'm a sophomore chemistry major and I'm funny. Now you can do that by saying, yeah, I'm a freshman quarterback. What you got, Taco Bell? Because I'm getting this from whatever Fred's House of Tacos, and then I've got this other off. So you could, at that point, you're in business, just like anybody else. That is the aim of it. Headline, LSU in signing day with 3 open spots. That was Ed Ogeron, and he had spoken before signing day saying, yeah, we may have 2 or 3 open depending on what happens. Did not get the JUCO offensive tackle who signed with Texas A&M. So if the math is correct, based on what Ogeron said earlier in the week, LSU has 3 spots open, and they're going to jump into the transfer market. There's a chance there's another wide receiver, and we've talked about it, that they could still target and get. But for the most part, they're done. And, again, this is subject to transfer portal changes. But headline, and this is from actually talking about this on Wednesday, I think it was. Auburn sophomore Barrett switches to running back. Let me say he switches back to running back. And I think Devin Barrett, he was a high school quarterback maybe, who went to Auburn as a running back, and ahead of spring practice, they have announced that he had gone to, I thought, the secondary, and then moved him to wide receiver. But with low numbers at running, which you never think that an SEC program will have low numbers at running back. With low numbers at running back, Devin Barrett has been moved to, he says, switches back after a couple of other stops to running back because, again, Auburn, you look at the depth chart right now, and with transfers and I mean, big name, like 4-star kids, I think 3 of them right now. Is it Joyner, Asa Martin, and DJ Williams? 3 4-star running backs over the past 2 years who have transferred out, and that's just kind of normal, so you got to restock the cupboard, and instead of going to either the transfer portal, which you may still do, or a high school kid, you said, hey, how about on our own roster? This guy's got a lot of experience. Consider yourself up to date. So that is going, like I said, ahead of spring practice. You are seeing some of these announcements made as brand new coaches. You go in and you look at tape from last year. This is, one thing that we're going to talk about with Brian Harsin in just a little while, that you look at the tape from last year, if that's your approach. There are some coaches that don't want any part of watching last year's tape. There are some coaches that think, well, I just want to get my impressions, and I know what position you play, and we'll go sort that out through a very basic and almost perfunctory spring practice, but we'll be ahead in the long run. I don't want to cloud my vision. That's not Brian Harsin. Went back, watched all the plays. You kind of get a download of what you personally think of the roster, and then you start moving positions. And it's one of the most valuable things you can do, whether it's I've talked about how John Mechie, that kid needs to be playing safety. He may actually represent Alabama at SEC Media Days as a wide receiver. And I got to tell you, if he's a wide receiver, and he's going to be. If he's a wide receiver, I'm voting for him for all SEC. And I think he would be an even better safety. It brings up something, though, that when it comes to Nick Saban, and not anything with position changes, but I think this coming year, we may have sort of a flashback to a Nick Saban from a much earlier day in his head coaching career. As I'm recalling, his team won a national championship that season too, but there is a chance that this year's Bama offense, it could resemble LSU back in the day. And I'm talking about running 4 future NFL running backs. And that's what Ali Broussard would have been if he didn't hurt his knee, and then he might have hurt his knee a second time.
2 minutes.
But I'm trying to remember, it was Justin Vincent, Chiron Carey, Joseph Adai, and Ali Broussard. LSU won a national championship with that foursome. And like Justin Vincent was SEC, I want to say he was Sugar Bowl MVP, and he might have set a bowl game record. And that was the highlight of his football life. Joseph Adai went on to be a first-round NFL draft pick with the Colts. I think he's a first-round pick. And again, Ali Broussard got hurt.
Minute 30.
Chiron Carey, again. But you looked at them and what they were on Saturdays in Baton Rouge, before injuries, before depth chart, whatever, what they were in Baton Rouge, they were 4 future NFL running backs. That may be what Alabama is basing their offense around this year. And if it's not 4, it may be 3 with a more than mobile quarterback, just a flat-out running quarterback. So there's a real good chance that we're having a little bit of a flashback to an approach that we saw Nick Saban take. Folks, that was almost 2 decades ago. That's when LSU was playing the home game in New Orleans against OU for a national championship. And Vincent went wild for 200 or whatever it was. And you look at what he left behind as well. It was Keelan Williams averaging 7 yards a carry running third team.
30 seconds.
So that is just an idea in my mind, maybe 3 running backs plus Bryce Young, that I'm going to keep a real close eye on Tuscaloosa for a lot of reasons. We all will in spring practice, but I got a suspicion about what their offense may look like a little bit this year. All right, I told you we talked to Auburn head coach Brian Harsin yesterday. Wanted to bring it back in the second hour today. Different audience. Want to give everybody a chance to listen to it, so we're going to take a quick break, come back, and it'll be Auburn head coach Brian Harsin. That's next on the Chuck Oliver Show. Want to welcome on right now, as a matter of fact, new head coach of the Auburn Tigers. It is Bryan Harsin. Coach, welcome. How are you today?
Chuck, I'm doing well. How are you? And glad to be on the show.
Yeah, I appreciate your time. Talk about your recruiting class and the decisions, because there are a lot more ways for it. Used to be either give the Scully, keep the Scully for later, maybe reward a walk-on. But now with the transfer portal, it's gone from finishing off a class to some programs looking around going, I need 7 or 8 linemen.
Well, you go back, it's changed quite a bit. Go back to before we had the early signing period, and everything was done in February. Then you added December. Then you have 2 signing periods, and now you have transfers. And exactly what you said, there's still opportunities for walk-on players to reward them. But there's just, recruiting's changed. It's year-round. There's attrition. There's transfers, and then there's other things along with the high school players that you're recruiting that just makes it where as you put your roster together, you look at what your needs are, and then you go and try to find the right fits in your program. But you also have opportunities now where when signing's over, you can still recruit guys to those positions. And that's where we are right now. We don't have the entire roster complete at this point. We have the guys that we've signed, and we're very proud of those guys and looking forward to having them here. Some are already on campus. But we'll continue through the spring, and we'll continue on until we have that 85 and those numbers, and especially going into this season with some of the super seniors that'll be a part of the program. That changes a little bit for 1 year, and then you're back on track in 22. So our thought process was let's get the best players right now. Let's get some needs in areas filled, and then let's continue to keep recruiting through the spring and see where we're at as we get through spring practice.
Chuck Oliver continuing with Auburn head coach Bryan Harsin. And I got to tell you, whenever there's a new head coach and he announces his coaching staff, it doesn't matter if it's me, fans, media, we all look at it and go, wait a minute, that guy's never coached in the South. There are other metrics to consider, and as you pointed out, there may actually be some benefit to kind of expanding a program's recruiting footprint to include the West Coast. But I got to tell you, when you put together a staff and it's not like 9 out of 10, from Florida, Alabama, Texas, et cetera, it will get a Southern football fan's attention.
Well, no question. And certainly with our staff, we understand our area of recruiting. It starts right here in the state of Alabama, number one, and then the other areas around here. And we know that. We do have coaches that have recruited in the West, and there are connections there. There's coaches that have recruited in Texas, but we know where our footprint's at. It's right here in the state of Alabama, Georgia, and those surrounding areas, and Florida as well. So, but I also think putting a staff together, recruiting is a large consideration in that, but at the same time, you want guys that want to be a part of this program, and you want coaches that can develop players. And I feel like that's what we found in this staff. Great coaches, great men. They know how to develop. They have a plan for that. They understand the game, and they also can build relationships. And so the areas that we need to recruit, the coaches that we need to connect with, and the players and the families, these guys can do that. And then there is an opportunity for some national recruiting if there are players that we feel fit our program in other areas because of some of the connections that we built at other programs.
Wrapping up with Auburn head coach Bryan Harsin, and I got to tell you, as an Auburn grad, I'm like, this next statement being true, it works for me. Spending more money doesn't necessarily guarantee better results on the field, but it can guarantee a better football facility. Clemson spent $55 million, I think, about 5 years ago. Georgia's opening an $80 million facility. You got a $91 million facility, in the process of being built. Talk about the future of Auburn football, because somebody else is going to build a $110 million facility in the future, but as of now, I can't imagine anything you would want in a facility that's not included in that one.
Well, I think all those, as you're talking about it, with those programs, and certainly here, it's a commitment to the excellence that you want for your program. And certainly here at Auburn, that commitment's strong. And it's the facilities, it's the people, it's all those things that, from top down, that we approach as being first class. And so when you have an environment where, and that is the facility, where your players and people, recruits and families and coaches all get a chance to come and gather, and it's first class. I mean, that's what this program is all about, and those are going to be important pieces for our success in attracting the right people to be a part of our program. And I appreciate the commitment that Auburn has, and I appreciate the things that we've talked about for the future of this program and how we want to build it. And certainly seeing that in action is important for our success. And I appreciate that. That's why I'm here, and why our staff and everybody in this program is excited about the direction we're headed and being a part of Auburn football.
Last question for you, and I don't know if it was stated this blatantly in the interview process, but one of the goals that really touches every part of your job is, hey, go compete against Nick Saban in Alabama in some way every single day of the year. And you looked at that and said, yep, sign me up. Just talk about that dynamic.
Well, first of all, I think that's why we're here, and I think that's why everybody wants to be a part of this program. You get to compete at the highest level against the best competition, and it's not just one team in particular; it's all the teams we play, and that's our focus. And part of that, I remember that question. I remember that conversation, and at the same time, I was thinking about just our program and what we have to focus on. And really, it comes back to Auburn. What do we have to do? There's a new staff. There's going to be changes in ways things have been done. We're bringing new players, and so our focus has to be on us. Our focus has to be on what we have to do so we can compete at the highest level. We can be the best football team that we possibly can be, and that goes back to each and every one of us understanding our area of responsibility and doing it to the best of our ability. So that's our focus right now. It's on us, what we have to do, the things that we're trying to implement, and each one of these guys and coaches staying focused on that. So when we do get to those games, and we will, we're prepared, ready, and we can go out there and play our very best.
Well, Coach, I know that to-do list is pretty lengthy. I appreciate you carving out some time today, man. Thank you.
All right, Chuck, thank you, and War Eagle.
Harrah's Cherokee. Live at Harrah's Cherokee in Cherokee, North Carolina. It is the Chuck Oliver Show. You know what it is, talking college football 2 hours a day. Been doing this since the beginning of the 2014 season, so I appreciate everybody putting that blessing in my life. Let's head out now from the Clemson Insider, good friend of the program. I want to welcome him back now. It is Will Vandervoort. Will, welcome. How are you today, man?
I'm doing good, Chuck. I just left the ESO, man, so I'm a little stuffed, as you can imagine. You've been there quite a few times, so you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you can feel the arteries loosen up, though, as you work through the rest of the day. So just kind of move around, walk around a little bit. You'll be okay. Let's talk about some headlines coming out of Clemson. How close was Tony Elliott to leaving? And how close has Venables maybe been in the past? Because they're both well paid now.
Yeah, to answer your question, Tony was probably closer than Brent Venables ever has been, to be honest with you. He was, from what I've gathered and talking to people, in Tony's camp, that they were pretty much almost a done deal with Tennessee, and then it came down to just Tony and his wife wanting to make that move, and Tony just felt like that it really wasn't his time. And so he got with Coach Sweeney, told him what he wanted to do, and that he wanted to stay in Clemson a little bit longer, and then, the rest of the story from that point.
I think that's a comment on DJ and the rest of the talent, not only coming back in 2021, but also a guy like Will Shipley, if they got plans for him. I mean, that's sort of a comment on what you're coming back to.
Oh, there's no doubt. I think that had something to do with it because, Brent Venables, you asked about him too earlier, and one of the things Brent's always said, that it's really hard to leave a place like Clemson because you just have athletes at your disposal and you're making good money. You got all these athletes and you don't have to worry about the things the head coach worries about. And, I think there is something to that with Tony. He's got some weapons next year. DJ is going to be taking over, and they're going to have a more experienced offensive line. They're going to have more depth on the offensive line this year. They've recruited well there, so they should be better. And then they're just loaded with skill players at wide receiver. Now, you wonder where, who's going to take the reign over for Travis Etienne at running back. I think that's going to be the number one question going into spring practice. But they got some pretty good guys coming in there as well, with Will Shipley leading the way as a five-star guy coming in with this current recruiting class.
Yeah, and I mean, looks, don't let him be deceiving. He's not a physically overwhelming kid. If you just look at him, he's about 5'11", just shy of 200 pounds. But what is the general idea about what may be possible? Because he was one of those, I think it's 19 kids in the class. They were all signed in December, and 11 or 12 of them were already enrolled, and Will Shipley was one of them. What's the general feeling about Shipley around the program?
Well, they really like his upside. Like you said, he's not really totally into his whole body type yet. Like, he's still got some room to grow and to get a little bit bigger. They want to see him get around 205, 210, kind of that Christian McCaffrey kind of size, if you will. They like the fact that he can he's already very skilled in the passing game, and that's going to be something different that they normally don't get with a running back coming right out of high school. But he kind of brings that element right to him, and so he's going to be definitely, I think, right off the bat, it's going to be like a third down weapon for him. Now the question is, though, we need to see what he can do as far as pass protection and things of that nature, because obviously college is a totally different beast. So, when you're trying to read defenses and things of that. So, but they really like his skill set and what he can bring not only to the running game, but what he can bring to the passing game. And I think that's why they're excited a lot about, his potential.
Well, as I mentioned, Clemson signed 19 kids, and like I said, it all happened back during the early period. Are there plans going forward? Because I know some of the coaching staff sort of rejumble that Coach Perriman is now sort of in charge of transfers, which nobody's ever had to be in charge of transfers at Clemson. Are they going to do? They got ideas for any final spots?
Yeah, I think what you're seeing, I don't think you're seeing anybody this year, but I think putting Danny Pearman in that situation, I think it's Dabo it's a position he's created that nobody else in college football really has right now. And I think what you're going to see, Chuck, is more teams start following Dabo's lead on that. And it's basically a guy who's designated to just watch the transfer portal. Find a kid who makes sense to Clemson. Dabo's all about the Clemson culture, and he recruits to that culture. And so a lot of the kids they bring in are kids that they feel like are going to come in and want to stay at Clemson. They're going to want to get their degree. It's not just about going to the NFL. And so I think that's Pearman's job, is to make sure they're getting the kids that come in with the right idea, the right mindset that will fit the culture, and are not just trying to get a paycheck. And that's big for Dabo. And so yeah, that's what Pearman's job is going to be primarily. He's also going to do self-scouting too with the team. So during the season, he'll be kind of breaking things down and going and reporting back to the coaches on some things they're maybe showing too much of or not doing enough of, and things of that nature as well.
Continuing, Will Vandervoort from TheClemsonInsider.com. Talk a little bit about the rest of the coaching staff, because there were, I guess, C.J. Spiller got added officially full-time, Mickey Kahn, new assignment, etc. Am I leaving anybody out?
No, yeah. So basically the regular position coaches, they kind of other than C.J., so what you had is you had Tony move to replace Danny Pearman as a tight ends coach. And Danny's been doing that since 2009 for Dabo. And then C.J. comes in as the new on-the-field coach. And so he'll take over that role as running backs coach for Clemson, which I think is a good move for Dabo. What better guy to have representing you than C.J. Spiller, a guy who not only had great success at college, at Clemson, but also played 8 years in the NFL, had a very successful career in the NFL as well, and was a all-pro in kick returns one year. So, I think that's a smart move there. And then the other things he's moved around, Thad Turnipseed, who's he kind of a guy he has in charge of external affairs and players development. He added on a couple things for him where he's going to help out with some different things with the program and on the recruiting side. And then just a couple other analysts they added. Andrew Zhao, who was a quarterback when Dabo was an assistant coach at Alabama. There in the late 1990s. He's come in and is going to be a developmental coach. And Cole Stout, a former Clemson quarterback, has now come in. Made some moves all the way around to kind of just, and then one guy that's coming in that a lot of people recognize this name, especially in the Atlanta area, is a guy named Ted Roof, who's going to come on and be a consultant, a defensive consultant for Clemson this coming season. They're still working through that process, but that should be finalized here in the next few weeks, I would imagine.
Again, wrapping up with Will Vandervoort from The Clemson Insider. All right, I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm saying not compared to, other college programs like normal college football programs, just compared to Clemson. 2020 Clemson wasn't the same, and I mean on either line of scrimmage. Can it look like what we're all used to again in 2021?
Well, I think the defensive line is pretty close to getting there. If a lot of people think, well, it wasn't that great of a year, yet they finished in the top 10 in rushing defense. They led the country in sacks and the number 2 in the country in tackles for loss.
And were freshmen.
And they were freshmen. And I think, there were some freshman mistakes. You saw that in their losses to Notre Dame and to Ohio State. But I think they're getting real close. I think you're going to see them really, especially with Xavier Thomas coming back for his senior year, and Justin Foster also coming back. Those guys are going to be healthy and ready to go, and they're just going to add to the depth of that defensive line, especially at defensive end. And then when you look at on the offensive side, I mentioned recruiting. They brought in 5-star Linthicum to be to kind of take over at center. They really like this kid. They think he's kind of like a Dalton Freeman kind of guy who, y'all guys remember, he was an All-American back in the early 2010s at Clemson. They really like him at that position. They think he's going to come in and really challenge for playing time right off the bat here and may take the job at the end of the spring for all we know. And then, they got a couple other guys they brought in also on that offensive line, a couple 4-stars. And then, Lee's a 5-star offensive tackle that they're really excited about. And they're hoping he can at least come in and compete and get himself in position to maybe win a job or at least be a real good second-team guy that they can bring in to help with depth. So they feel better about their depth on the offensive line going into the spring than they did last year at this time, because they knew it was just a matter of getting those guys some experience, which, as Clemson always does, even when it looks bad, they still play those guys because they know they got to get them experience, and they did a lot of that last year.
Last thing, I asked you about Cornell Powell during the season, I know, but if you had to guess right now, is there a Cornell Powell on the 21 team? And I'm talking about a kid who maybe over the course of one regular season doubles his production from the previous 3-4 seasons combined.
Yeah, I would say the guy for me would be Braden Galloway at tight end, especially with Tony Elliott now going and being in charge of the tight ends. Let's just look at Tony Elliott's track record, right, Chuck? He's coached 4 All-ACC, first-team All-ACC running backs. 2 are All-Americans, and one went on to break the all-time records in the Atlantic Coast Conference. So Tony's shown some production in how he has progressed and made his players better for his position. So now he's moving over to tight end, and he's got a talented guy in Braden Galloway, who I just think wasn't used enough last year in certain ways. And I think he's a guy that can come in. He had like 24, 23 catches this year. I could see him next year having 40-plus catches, maybe 500-600 yards receiving, because Tony's that kind of coach to me, and I think he's going to be able to coach up Braden Galloway and really put him in a position to shine. I think Davis Allen's another guy at tight end that I think is really going to be benefiting from Tony's coaching.
Will, outstanding. We are going to have 14 practices in a spring game. Everybody's going to get it, I guarantee you, this year, and we will have you back on when all that's unfolding, okay?
All right, Chuck. Thanks as always, buddy. We'll talk to you later.
Yes, sir. Will Vandervoort from the Clemson Insider. And this is a little different. I talked about Powell last year. His numbers and his even just the opportunity came from the Justin Ross injury. They were still, I don't mean to, I'm not going to downgrade this because Justin Ross, outstanding player, but they were still wide receiver catches and wide receiver yards and wide receiver routes and touchdowns and everything else. If that player on the 2021 team is a tight end or 2, Galloway and Davis, that's a different assignment for the defense over the course of a Saturday afternoon. That is a different monster for you to have to deal with for 4 quarters. And it's not something that you see often enough that it's a, quote, normal existence. It's like seeing a 3-back offense now. It used to be 8 of your 10 games, I'm going back to the 60s, 8 of your 10 games would be that type of situation. Then it's where, like Paul Johnson, part of the reason that he won as much as he did, part of the reason that Navy can beat a team like Notre Dame once every couple decades. Part of the reason that Air Force can extend the fight into the fourth quarter against big-time opponents is because you only see that, oh, gosh, the 3-back offense again. Same sort of thing here. Tight ends being a featured part of it. I said the most practical application of that is you could drop right now. Anybody, you're a casual fan. All right, doesn't matter. I've never coached. Doesn't matter. How are you going to double a wide receiver? Well, I guess we'll do it this way. Now, you don't actually double them until the route would take you to where the second guy is, but this double team. And it's kind of standard. There's no great way to double team tight ends. Just no, it is a really, now it's tough to have a tight end that makes it difficult on you, so difficult that you were thinking, all right, we got to put a second guy on him. A guy like maybe Gilbert can turn into at UF. Those guys are pretty rare. And when it is a tight end that you would want to double, at that point, you are creating giant holes in the back 7 of the defense. No other way around it. So difficult to get those guys, but if you have them and you decide to feature them, which he may now at Clemson because he's coaching tight ends, it's a whole different assignment for the other team. That is for sure. All right, we take a break. We'll come back, wrap up on a Friday next.
Mississippi to sign the best players in Mississippi, and some years it'll be more, some years it'll be less. And this just happened to be a big year. But also, in an initial press conference, told you guys that, we're going to be a national program.
Lane Kiffin, my guy at Ole Miss, and hey, baby, I'm going to take suspicion and all other negative approaches out of my reaction to that quote, because I just think he's being honest, and he's saying, some years will be more in Mississippi, but we want Ole Miss to be a national program. That's true, and Ole Miss needs to be a national program. There aren't enough players in the state at the level that you need. I'm talking about an SEC game wrecker. You're just not – he was, by the way, that was Lane Kiffin talking with Josh Pate from 24/7. There just aren't enough SEC game wreckers of that caliber in the state of Mississippi on a consistent rolling basis for you to win anything of consequence, partly because you just happen to be in the SEC and the West. This year, the 7th highest rated player in the state is a 3-star kid, MJ Daniels, who I think he's a cornerback, maybe? I think. That's what he was projected when I believe it was a Mississippi State commit earlier. And they were talking about him being a cornerback. He's a big kid, 6'3", 200 pounds. So I have no idea what he's going to do. He's listed as an athlete. A 3-star kid that you're not 100% certain how it works out for him, even position-wise. That's the 7th highest-ranked player in the state. So while he says, we're going to dominate Mississippi, he doesn't want to dominate Mississippi because you're comparing your haul of Mississippi high school players to everybody else's haul from that group. We got more. Well, there are years and I'm going to say most years. I think it was the 18 class. N'Kobe Dean and just some unbelievable players. I think that was 18. And it was a generational sort of class there in Mississippi. But it got noticed because it was a best class they had in 20 years. And it looked a whole lot like a class from Louisiana in sort of a normal year. Or a class from Georgia in kind of a down year. Numbers-wise, quantity-wise. So he's saying what you're supposed to. And I've always said that when you're talking to fans or booster groups or you're the media, you're getting that message out. I almost give you not a pass so much as say, because you can still get yourself and your program in trouble. But as far as just trying to fire up people, I don't say whatever you want. And he said, we're going to recruit the state of Mississippi and dominate. Well, in the right year, and that's when he went on and said, some days it'll be more. But we're going to be national because you have to. Because if you're Ole Miss and you're going to try to win something that you really value, at the least a division, if that's what you're going to do, go to California and get Matt Corral. Go to Philadelphia and get Kenny Yeboah for 1 year. I don't care. So just a tremendous job by Lane Kiffin in year one. Like I said, he got a lot of excitement with no on-campus recruiting, nothing going on, in person, nothing. I'm talking about going to high school campuses, having any of the kids on for visits, none of it. Not going to homes. Did a real good job of keeping Ole Miss very relevant and was able to, at least some of the players that he targeted in-state, able to get them. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and consider that my closing argument, brought to you by the law offices of Alexander Shannara and Associates, wherever you are in the Deep South, whether it's Florida or Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, wherever. If you need legal expertise, you need Alexander Shannara and Associates. Dan Matthews, how are you?
Oh, not too bad as we close out the week. And, Chuck, I got to thinking yesterday after I got the news out of Clemson of the contract extension for Tony Elliott and other people going different places, which, by the way, too, we just talked about this Will Vandervoort. How about former Astros third baseman Billy Spires on the staff for Dabo Swinney? So
his son is that punter.
Yeah, he is. He is. And he was a punter himself at Clemson as well. So truly a utility man during his playing days and showing as much as well with his work with the Clemson program. He's been with Dabo for years. But Dabo's got what we would consider to be a good problem to have because, Chuck, me and you both know when it's going bad for you, there are levels to show you as a coach that it's going bad, and the trend is going in the direction where soon enough
a certain direction is going to be taken where he is not going to be the head coach there anymore. And one of them for the chance that they're not going to be there anymore is when the coach is approached by the administration saying, you got to change up your coordinators. And once you change up your coordinators, there is no other straw for you to pull. It is either it works or it doesn't, and they find somebody else who makes it work. For Dabo, it's the good problem to have because we've seen it for years with Nick Saban where it's almost yearly where he's not having to replace a coach, he's having to replace coaches. And this year is just another example of that. But for Dabo, last year, loses his offensive coordinator to go become, co-offensive coordinator to go become the head coach at South Florida. This year, he's got to break off Tony Elliott because he knew that Tennessee was at least kicking the tires enough to at least pique his interest so much that it was reported that he was already gauging other coaches' interest of moving on. And now the next step for this is that Dabo will become Nick Saban in this, where soon enough, you got to believe that Tony Elliott will say yes to somebody and he will move on. And then also, too, you wonder if when Brent Venables' son moves on from the program, if he decides for himself, you know what? Hey, maybe it is time for me to show coaches and show college football what I can do as a head coach because we've played pretty good defense here at Clemson, and it's been the reason why we've won a couple of national titles along with the great offense that they've had at the time, where I think that eventually that will come for him. And then that is going to be the next challenge for Dabo Swinney is how good of a coach are you now when you haven't had the guys who have been around you for the longest time?
Ain't no doubt about the unusual nature of Dabo being able to hold on to his coordinators, especially Brent Venables, who I bet it's been 5 years now. Teams have been trying to bird dog him, get him off that staff, and he has resisted the overtures. And now with his son and being on the team and all that, it's all kind of coming home for him. The reason he put that long-range plan together, and with Elliott, Jeff Scott leaving and going down to South Florida kind of put a little bit more of a focus and responsibility on him. And I mean, my gosh, they still made it to the playoffs, and the only game they lost was, in overtime without the number 1 overall pick. So just a really good debut season flying solo there with Tony Elliott. All right, wraps it up on a Friday from Harrah's Cherokee, the book. Harrah's Cherokee up in Cherokee, North Carolina. Again, a little preview weekend ahead of the Super Bowl. Love being here. Going to be back throughout the entire year. Our Friday home ahead of huge sporting events right here at Harrah's Cherokee.